Whether you're hitting the road or kicking back in the cab, it's time to take a load off with Big Rig Banter. Powered by AllTruckJobs.com, your source for finding the trucking jobs drivers really want. Get ready to shift into gear and let the conversations roll.
All right, hello and welcome, truckers. This is Troy Diffenderfer, and the date is August 1st, and this is the 18th episode of Big Rig Banter. I know things seem a little odd right now. You're not used to hearing my voice to start things off, but we have some bittersweet news. Like all great things, like the show Friends or the McRib from McDonald's, all great things must come to an end, and my wonderful co-host Connor has decided to take his ventures elsewhere. Again, we wish him the best, but all that means is you get to hear my smooth, velvety voice for the next 30 or so minutes. This episode is talking about the Uberization of trucking, and we're going to talk with some people in the industry that are intent on making life for truckers much easier. So let's just jump right into it. So what is the Uberization of trucking? It's not just a fancy word with a lot of syllables and that's hard to pronounce for me. It's actually a term that means the way technology can bridge the gap between a company and consumer. While we hit on a few previous components of Uberization in previous episodes like ELDs and autonomous trucks, which you can check out, those links in the show notes, I'm going to take a look at this technology in a broader sense. Basically, we're going to take a look at anything that could help the trucking and transportation industries run smoother than ever. I'll break down a handful of different technologies that are quickly moving into production and just how they could impact you truckers. And I have some special guests that are going to talk about some of their technologies, and I think they're pretty awesome, so stay tuned for that as well. So first, let's talk about mobile technology. And in this case, we're going to talk about mobile, quote unquote, in two different senses. In the first case, we're talking about mobile as in your mobile device. Just in the last few years, we've seen dozens of apps unveiled that will help the trucking and transportation industries. There's a lot of apps out there that are designed to make your driving journey as smooth as possible. One app, Copilot Live Trucking, is the first of its kind app, and it uses voice-guided GPS navigation to give drivers customized, safe, and reliable truck legal routes calculated based on vehicle size, weight, and load type. I know many of you probably have a GPS, but it often doesn't take into consideration the load size or the traffic pattern or anything like that. So this is a pretty cool app that you might want to invest in. Another one, Gas Buddy. Are you looking for the ideal spot to fill up? Well, Gas Buddy tells you the diesel prices all across the US so you can ensure you're getting the best deal. I know that's always something you guys think about when you're filling up. You want to find the best fuel deal possible. So that's also another app to check out. And then finally, another app, DriveWise, features an app that truckers can use to bypass those pesky weigh stations. The company provides bypasses in 36 states and over 600 inspection sites. Finally, there are a few apps out there that are designed to make sure the loading process runs smoothly, and luckily we got the chance to sit down with Dan Serowicz, owner of Dock411. And you might remember Dan from our previous GATS episode. We covered the Great American Trucking Show last year, as well as this upcoming year, so keep an eye out for that episode. But before we get into any of that, let's take a listen to our interview with Dan. All right, I'm here with Daniel Serowicz. He is the co-founder of Dock411. Daniel, thanks for coming on to talk to us again.
No problem. I always enjoy talking to you.
Awesome. So let me start with, there's this buzzword Uberization that's been thrown around lately. Can you explain kind of what this means and what role a company like Dock411 plays in all this?
Yeah. It's well, the way I like to think about it is, trying to make people's lives easier with technology. The whole Uberization, grab a phone, have a stranger pick you up and take you where you need to go, and it all was based off your phone. So, to give a little brief background about Dock411, just to catch anybody up who hasn't heard about us, we have an app for truck drivers to see details about their stops before they make them. So they can look up their shipper receiver and see things like where the docks are actually at, where they're getting loaded or unloaded. They have any parking available? Is there a restroom available? How clean was it? We hear nightmare stories all the time of locations with horrible bathrooms, not even worth using. But wait times, if there's a lumper fee or not. We collect like 70 different attributes about each shipper facility, and then that app gives the driver the ability to rate that facility as well and rate their experience. Were they treated like a professional? How clean was the place? Those types of things. So we're trying to really help the boots on the ground type of person, and that's the drivers, and giving them this information that we've been told they definitely want to know before they make that stop, so they are better prepared for that stop and hopefully save themselves some time and money.
Awesome. Well, that's an awesome thing to think about. And so how can the trucking industry evolve while still keeping the driver in mind? I know there's a lot of truckers out there that see these automated trucks and see kind of everything in the trucking world become automated. How do you think technologies like yours and just the technology industry in general kind of quell their fears and kind of make sure that the truckers always remains first?
Yeah. It's actually, I was talking to somebody the other day, and so we deal with the shippers as well. So we allow the shippers to put their information out there so the truck drivers can find. And then we label it as that information coming from that shipper. So it's their official listing, and the drivers know that it came from that shipper. And there's such a communication problem with those two types of audiences. And somebody's like, wow, okay, you're using technology to bring people closer together. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. So I didn't really think about it like that, but just like bettering the communication between those two audiences that normally don't talk that much, or there's not a lot of interaction. So from our side of things, we're trying to connect people and what they're experiencing through technology. Totally get the fear of the autonomous trucks and things like that. I think we're a little ways away from that, even years away from that being consistent. Maybe DC to DC type of lane for those, but I definitely get the people's fear of it, and I think we're a little far away. But our whole goal is to really, like that person said, is connect people through the technology. We don't want to. We're not trying to take jobs away or anything like that. We're trying to put those people in contact in a fast and easy way.
And GATS is coming up shortly. I know that's definitely a huge thing for you guys. What does GATS do for a company like yours, or maybe these smaller companies that are kind of just getting off the ground or have only been around for a few years? Why is GATS so important to a company like yours?
GATS, first off, I love GATS, and I love Dallas. I had not been to Dallas since we started doing GATS. So Dallas is always a great time. But not only is it a great time, but it really helps out our business by we get exposure to those drivers, and we're really feedback driven. We know our app is not far from perfect. It will probably never be perfect. But we're able to get in front of the drivers that are using it, for one. So we have those existing users coming to us, socializing with us, getting to know us, seeing that we're actually people behind a computer screen or behind the keyboard or behind social media. There, we're normal guys throwing together a product that's useful to them. So it's interacting with the existing users and getting their feedback. We take that very seriously. And then it's just educating other drivers about it. What's funny is what I've noticed, even working the booth, is the drivers walking down the aisle, and the initial reaction if you try to talk to them right away is like, "Oh man, don't sell me something." They think I'm trying to go for them to just try to get in their wallets, but definitely not trying to do that. Once I break that barrier, and I just explain what we're doing. They're like, oh wow, that's really cool. That's, if I would have had this yesterday, I would have known to not take the load because I waited 15 hours, or they had this type of dock and I damaged my truck because of it was too tight of maneuverability. I was a big sleeper on the cab with a 53-foot trailer, and I couldn't get in and out of there easily, bumped a wall, curb, whatever, and damaged my truck. So we hear these stories all the time. So it's really awesome to tell them what we're doing. And they instantly, you see the gears start turning in their head, and they start throwing ideas like, oh man, I wish I had this. And it's awesome feedback. That's invaluable to us. So another great thing is getting in touch with other trucking technologies. We have our product is very complementary to other trucking technologies out there, like say, just for instance, GPS. GPS will get you to that location. Then we take over and it's like, okay, what do you do when you get there? So we're very complementary to each other. So we have what we call technology partners, and we're integrating in multiple levels, integrating into other people's software to better that user's experience. No matter what that trucking technology is, we're integrating with multiple as we speak. So those couple big ones as well that we're really excited about that unfortunately I can't say right now, but it's really cool to get to know those companies. You see them online, stuff like that, but it's really cool to put a face with a company and really talk about it. And the nice thing, people come up to Dock411 because we're a new concept in the industry, and they're like, well, they're kind of timid, like, what are you guys doing? And then we explain what we're doing, and then they realize we're not competing with them at all, but we're very complementary. So then it's like, okay, the pressure's off, and we can just sit and chat about our businesses and how we can help each other grow and better our users. So that's been really beneficial. We've gotten to know tens of, at least 20, 30, 50 companies just that way, and have connections through them to integrate our products. So that's been really awesome. There's not a whole lot of shippers at this event, of course, because it's a trucking type of event. So we mainly focus our energy on the drivers, and then these integrations that will be happening, because again, those will be helping the drivers down the road as well.
Awesome, Dan. And again, listeners, you can catch both Big Rig Banter and Dock411 at GATS. Dan, I expect you to come visit us at the Long Haul Lounge. We're going to have some couches set up where you can put your feet up and kick back. I know it's going to be a crazy day, so you'll definitely need some.
Yeah, we'll definitely be doing that, because I don't know, I forgot how many steps we take a day on the Fitbit or whatever, but it's absolutely crazy. I mean, the place is huge, so you gotta walk it, and you can't just walk it once. You gotta walk it 3 or 4, 5 times, and then we really rack up the steps. So a place to sit down on a comfortable couch sounds great.
Awesome. So just to wrap things up, Dan, where do you see the Uberization of transportation taking us in the next 20 years? I know it's rapidly improving. What do you kind of expect to see, or where do you see Dock411 going?
Well, we're at a cool point. I think in this time, there's a lot of technology being thrown at the industry, and we're seeing who is sinking and who is failing, or who's sinking, who's floating, those types of things, and who's gonna last the and get in front of enough people and make enough revenue to stay afloat and bring enough value. We saw it with the ELD companies. There was probably 200 out there a year or two ago, and now there's probably half that or so. So I see that kind of happening, and we've been judged by that as well. They were Matt's the truck show, Mid-America Truck Show in Louisville. It was like we had been out 2.5 something years at that point, and the guards came down with some of the other companies that we've been trying to talk to, and it was really pretty neat that, like, okay, well, they've stood the test of time, and they're not going anywhere. They're not a flash in the pan. We have plans to really stick this out as long as possible. But it's it's pretty neat. So then a lot of technology comes in the industry, and then like we're doing, seeing a lot of integrations happening, and a lot of people teaming up together to bring more value to their users. I think that's awesome. To have their user or drivers in mind, and to bring as much value as possible. And you can't do everything yourself. Even big companies, they can't do everything themselves. So they stick to their core goals and core functions, and team up with people who have what they need as their core functions. Everybody wins, and that's what we're seeing, and it's pretty nice. So I'm 20 years. I don't know. There might be flying trucks by then, but for the immediate future, yeah, I see the technology game just getting better and better. There's still a ton of technology out there, but there's still a lot of inefficiencies, and it's just figuring out ways to make those better. Yes, autonomous trucks will be a thing in the future. I think we're still a little far out, but I think I see those as, DC to DC thing, just off the highway to off the highway, a couple hundred miles at a time or what have you. So it'll be pretty interesting to watch that evolve, but I do think we're still a little ways out. But Dock411, yeah, we're just going to keep pushing forward, getting as many shippers on board as we can, because when we get those shippers on board, they give the information to the drivers that need it. And after that, so to catch us up, we started with the drivers. We wanted a grassroots effort to grow this, and we started with the drivers because we wanted to show demand. So we have just sub 10,000 drivers now that are definitely demanding this information. We're trying to get it as fast as humanly possible, and we're working with the shippers to do that. So now we can go to a shipper and say, Mr. Shipper, Mrs. Shipper, our driver base is wanting this information, this type of stuff. And I was very guilty of that. I came from the warehousing side of things. I didn't come from the trucking side of things. And typically, I think I was working warehousing before. They know you're kind of understaffed sometimes, and under-resourced and things like that. So you're always inward focused. What do we got to do? How much time do we got to get too much stuff done? And we never looked outside our dock doors. Well, in this market, shippers kind of have to look out their dock doors now, and we're here to educate them and kind of tell them from the driver's side of things how things are, what they're getting into, how could they communicate better with each other. So once we get a bigger shipper base in our platform, then we can drive a lot more value for the carriers and broker side of things. So which is another crazy digital game as well. So but no, that's kind of where we're headed, and that's kind of our future. We believe we bring value to all four audiences, but some immediate and some here in the future.
Awesome. Well, again, that's Daniel Serowicz. I thank you, co-founder of Dock411. Dan, thanks again. I appreciate you coming onto the show, and of course, you're always welcome to come on the show. And awesome. We look forward to linking up at GATS.
Yeah, for sure. I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Yep. Thank you.
Again, a big thanks to Dan Serowicz, who will once again be at GATS this month. And you know who else will be at GATS? That's Big Rig Banter. You can catch many of us at the Long Haul Lounge. You can win great prizes, and it's going to be a really fun time. So I encourage you guys to stop by and visit us. I'll be holding down the fort back at the home base, but we'll have Lene and Margaret there doing some on-the-scene interviews, as well as giving away some awesome prizes. So I really encourage you guys to stop by our booth at GATS. It's going to be a lot of fun. And hey, you never know, you might get on the next episode. All right, let's get to our next subject. I won't get into autonomous trucking too much here. If you want to learn more, feel free to check out the BRB episode covering the industry. I will, however, say that this technology isn't going anywhere. I know this is a controversial subject between truckers. Many fear that these autonomous trucks could take their jobs, but I think the only way to go about it is to embrace it. There's new companies that are constantly emerging within the industry, including Uber, and we actually have a recent blog that you can check out in the show notes that covers their autonomous trucking initiative, and it's pretty interesting. But let's talk about electric trucks. It's something we haven't really covered on many episodes, but it's certainly unique. These aren't your average electric lawnmowers or electric cars. These are the big daddy trucks that we're talking about here, and they're environmentally friendly, which have many politicians and many people backing them. But don't take my word for it. Let's chat with a company that has one of the coolest names in the game, actually, Thor Trucking. I'm talking about the big blonde dude with a hammer. Looks like my twin, actually. But I sat down with Thor Trucking CEO and founder Dakota Semler. So let's hear what he had to say about his electric trucking initiative. All right, so I'm here with Dakota Semler. He is the CEO of the Thor Trucking Company. Dakota, how's it going?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I appreciate you coming on the show. We were keeping an eye on Thor, and the trucks are pretty awesome looking, as is the company name. So it was really exciting to get you to come onto the show today.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
So why don't you
be pretty bold in the design?
Yeah, so why don't you give us some backstory on the Thor Company? How did you kind of get into the industry, and how did the Thor Trucking Company kind of come to be?
Yeah, I'd love to. So a little bit of background on me. My family operated a trucking company here in Southern California, and we did mostly materials hauling, but we had some dedicated freight contracts as well, and we spanned the gamut of kind of various different local operations. And we really had the impetus for starting Thor was because of a few of the challenges we encountered within our fleet. So in the mid-2000s, the California Air Resources Board created some new rules around diesel heavy-duty emissions, and we were pretty heavily impacted by those new rules. And we shortly thereafter decided to shut down the fleet. We didn't feel like we could comply in a reasonable amount of time, so we liquidated all of our trucks and trailers. And I got into other businesses, but trucking was still kind of in my blood, and still wanted to figure out a solution, right? Because the large companies of the world were figuring out ways to adjust to the new emissions rules, and a lot of those small businesses like ours were kind of forced to go out of business, or drivers were forced to work for larger companies or leave the state of California. So that's really how we got into it. We wanted to provide a solution that could help solve the emissions challenges that we deal with in California and some of the other major metro markets, but also keep our business alive.
And we're seeing a lot of these young companies, especially when it comes to either electric trucks or autonomous trucks, and everyone throws around this buzzword, Uberization. Can you kind of explain to listeners what really Uberization is and kind of how a company like Thor plays a role in the industry?
Definitely, yeah. So Uberization is, I think, the general term that refers to the industry evolving to a kind of asset-light model where companies don't necessarily operate the asset, and independent operators will operate an asset and kind of work through various brokerages or online load boards or kind of digital load boards. And it's interesting because only recently, I think the last 3 years or so, Uberization has also involved the concept of autonomous, right? And if there is autonomous trucks, how does that impact the Uberization of the trucking fleet in the U.S.? And I think that is something that we take a pretty different stance on than some of the other companies in the space. So I'll start with kind of the asset-light model. I think when people think about like traditional gig economy businesses like Uber or Lyft, the trucking industry has operated that way for decades, right? Truckers have been able to own their own asset, yet work for a major company and be a company driver and reap some of the benefits of that flexibility and also some of the economic benefits there. So I don't think Uberization is such a new term to the industry, or such a new method to the industry. It's just maybe a new term or nomenclature. But when autonomous comes into play, I think a lot of people are in fear of job and job security. And that's where we're not as bullish on the impacts of autonomous. There are definitely implications for it. And I think the leading implication and what we want to provide is improved safety conditions, right? Trucking is still one of the most dangerous career paths you can choose to take. And we think we can considerably improve that, whether it be collision avoidance or lane keeping, driver awareness. They're all things that we can do. We can basically improve upon, both us and the traditional manufacturers. When people say that, in 5 years there's going to be 0 truck driving jobs, or even a reduction of 1 million truck driving jobs, I think that's a gross overassumption. One of the things that people outside of this industry tend to do is they trivialize the role of a truck driver. Drivers are so much more than just the operator of the vehicle. They do bill of ladings, they do pick slips, they do all kinds of customer relationship functions, and they really serve as more of a logistics coordinator today than they ever have in the past. And that's something that can't be automated with autonomous trucks. That's a relationship. It's something that goes to service other functions of the business, whether it be inventory control or inventory management or asset management. So I don't think drivers will. I think drivers will be around for quite some time, and hopefully, all of these new technologies only aim to improve the safety conditions of the industry.
For sure. And, when it comes to Thor, what are some other selling points when it comes to a technology like this? I know there's the environmental one, but I know there's probably truckers out there that are saying, well, what if the technology is too complicated? Or what if the Thor truck's too expensive, or something that we can't afford, or anything like that? What are some selling points you guys kind of offer and kind of put buyers at ease when it comes to stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest factors. I'm gonna quote one of our drivers here, but we were doing an interview for another journalist, and she asked our driver. She said, "Aren't you gonna miss the roar of your 15-liter Cummins?" And he goes, "I would, but I'm 60% deaf in my right ear, so I won't miss it that much." So obviously, I think there's pretty obvious improvements within the cab. The driver experience, everything from noise to vibration, just vehicle ergonomics in general, because you don't have a large, 12 or 15 liter engine kind of straddled in between the cab. Those are sort of the obvious improvements. And then I think the big thing is maintenance, right? So independent operators know this intimately well, and even company drivers understand the challenges that a lot of these new emission systems that have been introduced in the past 10 years have created for the vehicles. And this has created this kind of auxiliary industry of glider kits and glider trucks. We firmly believe that electric trucks are much simpler, right? So there's none of the complex emission systems, depth systems, SCR systems that you have to deal with on a modern diesel today. And that results in a truck that requires less maintenance. And then if you compare it just to a conventional diesel vehicle that doesn't have an emission system on it, you have anywhere from 20 to 100 moving parts in a electric powertrain. So just the amount of things that can go wrong is a lot less. So we firmly believe these vehicles they're going to be 1-million-mile trucks. It's not an issue of demonstrating that. There's been electric vehicles that have demonstrated the powertrains have lasted well beyond their expected lifespans. I think it really comes down to education, right? And a driver who's spending 8 to 12 hours or 16 hours a day inside of a truck wants to understand how it works. And so that's a big part of how we talk to our customers and our drivers, and is educating them how their vehicle works, so they can understand that maybe there are certain things like maintenance that they can actually do themselves. And then some of the more specialty things like high voltage maintenance or battery maintenance, there's resources for that as well.
And what sets Thor apart from other major players? Dakota, we've seen these big guys like Tesla and Mac throw their hats into the ring, these big brand names that everyone kind of knows about. How does Thor plan on standing out from the crowd?
Definitely. So the big thing with us, if you look at a lot of the traditional kind of OEMs in the space, they're hardware manufacturers, they're truck manufacturers through and through. Many of them have been that way for decades or, almost 100 years. And they're focused on kind of continuing in that realm of business, in that realm of their business model. We're focused on that as well as delivering energy, right? And that's one of the critical things that I think people underestimate in getting into this industry is the amount of energy and the distribution of that energy to get it to the place where, vehicles need to charge is a critical kind of value chain in this industry. And so we're focused on that and developing charging solutions for individual fleets and drivers that goes beyond just what a traditional OEM might provide you. So an OEM today, if you go to them, they're going to say, hey, we have this charging solution, but that's just the charger. That doesn't deal with procuring the power and getting the power on site and the distribution from the local utility. And that's where a lot of our team has expertise and where we're focusing kind of on differentiating. When it comes to the actual vehicle itself, we've relied a lot on suppliers and partners. So working with various suppliers and really trying to not reinvent the wheel on the truck. A lot of the OEMs that are in the space today have built great products. And so we're working with a lot of the same supply base as them to bring a lot of those great products that are reliable, that are in the supply base. So if you need a replacement part, you can get it, and build something that drivers will ultimately like better than the existing options out there.
And where do you see the Uberization of transportation taking us in the next 20 years? Or where would you like to see Thor kind of taking the transportation industry in the next 20 years?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that we forget every day, or maybe if you're driving a truck every day, you might not forget it, but a lot of the general public tends to forget is that trucking moves this country, and the freight industry really is the reason everything. It's the reason why you have food on your table and why you have a job, and there's so many impacts that trucking has on this country. And I think we can only strengthen that resource. What I would love to see is to improve the industry overall. So improve the work environment for drivers today, right? Improve the workplace, improve the emissions that these vehicles are putting out. There's no reason these vehicles can't fulfill all the requirements that they need to from a power standpoint, from a range standpoint, and be good for the environment. And I think ultimately move freight more efficiently too. So that's one of the big things, as we've migrated to this e-commerce economy where you have companies like Amazon generating a ton of demand of, goods movement. How do we scale and grow with that consumer demand? The trucking industry that basically is the backbone of getting goods to people. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and so we have our work cut out for us. But there's really a lot of opportunity too, given the growth in the industry.
Well, awesome. I'm excited to definitely watch you guys grow and definitely become a major player and see where the industry itself takes off. Dakota, I really appreciate you joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me, and appreciate you taking the time.
Yep. Again, that's Dakota Semler from Thor Trucking Company. Dakota, thanks so much. Again, a big thanks to CEO and founder Dakota Semler for dropping the hammer on some awesome trucking technology. They as well will be at GATS, as will we. So make sure to check both of us out, especially check out the Long Haul Lounge, take a load off, win some awesome prizes. Again, I'm not going to stop saying it, truckers. This is the place you want to be when you head to GATS. But let's talk about another piece of technology, and this is probably one of the most unusual pieces of technology out there, and that's called blockchain. And to be honest, it's still really confusing to me when it gets into all that technology using the internet and cryptocurrency. That stuff's pretty wild, but I'll try my best to explain it to you guys. The blockchain concept originally was developed to support the digital currency Bitcoin, but technology experts are actually exploring a whole universe of possibilities to apply it to other industries, including transportation. Blockchain will essentially provide another aspect of interoperability and visibility within the supply chain, much like electronic data interchange, application programming interfaces, or web services. So, to put it in easier terms that I myself can understand, basically, it will essentially make your transactions safer. These receipts you get instead of paper receipts will become digital receipts, and they're much safer, and it will record data for your own and your company's records, and it will just make the overall transactions much safer. The cybersecurity is extremely safe, and that's something you're going to see when it comes to these major trucking transactions and stuff like that. I also think it's important to talk about load boards. It's a technology that continues to rise, and while they've been around for quite some time, we're seeing more and more freight companies and truckers taking advantage of this technology. It's basically a service that links freight companies with truckers who are willing to move the freight. This is especially great for those owner-operators looking to find the ideal trucking loads. If you're thinking about becoming an owner-operator, or you're a current owner-operator, we've got an entire podcast episode that you can check out in the show notes. Or if you're looking for an owner-operator job, don't forget to check out AllTruckJobs.com. We're going to find you that ideal owner-operator job, I promise. All right, but before we put this podcast in park, let's talk about how all this technology is going to change things for you truckers. I know many can be apprehensive about the rise of all this technology. Many fear it could take over, but I think in the end it's going to be a pretty awesome thing. I think it's going to make your lives easier. I know this ELD thing has been a struggle, but I think there's a lot of technology out there, and a lot of it has been created by truckers. There are people within the industry that want nothing more than to help you, and I think that's pretty exciting. I think you really want someone that has your back, and I think a lot of these technologies do. So I don't want you guys to get discouraged out there as you see the world flying by with these new technologies. I think you're going to be just fine. But before we wrap things up, I want to let you know about a few things coming up. Again, we will be at GATS, so make sure to look out for us. We'll be at the Long Haul Lounge giving away some awesome prizes, doing some on-the-spot interviews, so keep an eye out for that. We'd love to see you there. Shoot us a message if you're going to be there, or if you are looking for an interview, want to tell us about some awesome piece of technology. We're always looking for people to interact with. And for our next episode, that's exactly what it's going to be about. We're going to do a recap of GATS, what our time was like there. We're going to talk to some of our own team members, as well as people who are already out there. Once again, folks, I'm Troy Diffenderfer, and this has been Big Rig Banter.
By freight or driver type to get back on the road with confidence. Click subscribe to keep the conversations coming. Until next time on Big Rig Banter.